Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's a History podcast. I am your host, Madison, and this week I am joined by Felicia Salber to discuss her upcoming novel, Kinightly Whispers. Felicia is a professor and an author who uses medieval history to root her novel in what she describes as HistoRomantasy. Way back in episode 35, I discussed the history of romance novels and how they evolved to what we have today. In this episode, through this conversation with Felicia, we look at how she has rooted her story in poems from the Arthurian time and how she has used these poems to shape her telling of the classic story of King Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot, furthering the evolution of the romantasy novels I have discussed prior to include this historically rooted subgenre. In this episode, there is direct discussion of sexuality and other topics of a more explicit nature. That said, this was a wonderful conversation, and I am so glad to have you guys listen in. With that, let's get right into the conversation. So, hello and welcome to another episode of It's a History podcast. Today I am joined by Felicia Salber, and we're here to talk about the Middle Ages, HistoRomantasy, and some other fun things. Felicia, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself a little, maybe tell us a little bit about your work, and maybe how you got into writing.
Hi, Madison. I'm very happy to be here today, and thanks for the invitation. Yeah, my name is Felicia, and I'm writing HistoRomantasy, which basically means a type of romantasy where the magic is not very relevant. What's actually relevant is deep, deep history and the world, the Middle Ages, that is really like driving the plot, plus the romance. The romance is very important. Yes, it's an Arthurian world. It's an Arthurian story. So it centers King Arthur and Queen Guinevere and Sir Lancelot, obviously. And they get into various troubles while, of course, they are very much involved with each other, as always. And the novelty in this is that it's not magical, however, it's still enchanted in the sense that it's an alternative history. Women hold power. Women are not second-class citizens. They are not relegated to towers. They are not just damsels in distress. They are really agents of their own future and their own fate.
I really enjoy reading books where women have more of a leading role and they're not just side characters or someone who is just always needing help, but they are able to build their own. So how did you get into writing this? What sparked your inspiration?
My biggest spark of inspiration was this medieval poem called Lancelot, Knight of the Cart, which not many people heard about, but it's amazing. This is actually the first ever romantasy in literature, or one of the first for sure. Romantasy in quotation marks, because it was not considered a romantasy back then. People didn't know this word back then. It was not a genre back then. But if you think about it, this is a fantasy story where the knight goes on a quest, faces down enemies, saves the damsel in distress, and very importantly, they have sex in this poem. And that's super interesting because back in the Middle Ages, Europe was very Christian and very puritanic. So it was not possible to write about sex in a poem, not even in a popular type of poem like this. So the rest of the history from this age, from the 12th century, are completely pure and chastised. Like the knight is always in love with the lady, but they never, it's a very pure love. It's chastised. They could never imagine touching each other. It's not about that, right? Mm-hmm. But in that one story, in that one poem, they actually do it. And they do it explicitly. It's right there on the pages. You can read it. I have a blog post about it. If you go to my blog, you can read it. That's my very first blog post ever on my blog, so it's easy to find. They actually do it. They sleep with each other, they touch each other, it's very passionate, very gentle. Lancelot even asks for consent. Imagine that. He actually asks, "Can I do this? Can I touch you?" And she says, "Yes, of course." So I consider it the first romantasy of literary history. I think that's fair enough to say.
Well, I did not know about this poem, but I've spent a lot of time with medieval history, especially when I was in college. I took a lot of classes around that time, and then even further into the Renaissance. And it is very, very chaste, very non-explicit.
Yeah.
So hearing that there is something from, you said the 12th century?
It's 12th century. It's a French poem.
So
there is an English translation.
Hearing something that's that old that is similar to stuff that we see today is very interesting.
Yeah.
So with this poem, how did reading this poem get you into thinking about maybe this is something that I can use as inspiration for my own writing?
Yeah. So, I got fascinated by this poem and the Arthurian history and, the legends and the knights and everything. And what I did not like in this poem was that Guinevere is a damsel. She's very passive. She's this very typical female kind of person who doesn't really do much except for waiting for the knight to be saved. And I wanted to do her justice. And I just wanted to write a Guinevere who would save the day, who would be the knight herself, who would be the one who saves Arthur and Lancelot and everyone else. Why she should be still a person. She should be a person, right? She should not be like this superhero, strong female character, whatever. No, of course, she has faults. She struggles. She has to overcome herself, all these things. But she's not the typical damsel in distress that we see so often. So I just wanted to have a powerful fighter, Guinevere main character.
Awesome. So with this poem and its explicitity, is there anything else in this era that is similar to that has that kind of explicit nature, or like it describes things a little bit more than maybe other writings in the same time period?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is another very interesting, again, French, but it's a prose, it's not a poem. It's, I think, 50 years later, 13th century, early 13th century, I think. And it actually depicts, it's a different story. It's a completely alternative universe, but still Arthurian. And in this one, Lancelot is actually bisexual. Like, he has a male lover. He's still in love with Guinevere. He's still in love with the queen. They still have this affair and everything. But he also has a male lover, another knight. And it's pretty clear. Lancelot actually says that he wants to be buried together with this best friend, this best companion, which means if you want to be buried with someone else in the Middle Ages, it means you're in love. This is the most important signature indication that you're in love with someone, that you want to be buried together. So these two guys get buried with each other after they die and everything. So yeah, they are lovers. It's all there. While Lancelot is still in love with Guinevere and all those things. So I think that this is, again, fascinating. And
interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
This is definitely not something you hear about in school.
Yeah, I know.
No, that's really interesting, though. So you have rooted your writing in this Arthurian time period, King Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot. One of the things that we have with historical Camelot is some myths or false beliefs. Is there anything regarding that you can maybe debunk or just give some more explanation as to what some of those beliefs are?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the most important misconceptions about historical Camelot is that it was white. There is this conversation going on about the Odyssey, the new famous movie and everything. I'm not going to touch that. But the same is sometimes discussed about Camelot, like about BBC's Merlin, the series. We had a black Guinevere, and some people were like, yeah, how could she be black? Like, there were no black people back then. And this is just not true. Like, this is just factually not true. Black people and people of color lived in medieval Europe. Even in Roman times, even in ancient Rome was not white, far from it. Like, even geographically, if you look at the map, Rome was around the Mediterranean and some parts of Africa belonged to Rome, the Roman Empire. So obviously, those geographical places were not white. They are not white today. They were not white back then. Rome was really, really diverse when it comes to skin color and ethnicity. So it was not white, far from it. And medieval Britain was also not completely white. Actually, I was really surprised to learn that a few years ago, researchers, archaeologists found remains, like buried people, like skeletons of sub-Saharan people, so people from the middle of Africa, buried in the British Islands in the 7th century, so early Middle Ages, 7th century burial grounds with remnants of sub-Saharan African people. So Black people actually existed in the early Middle Ages on the British Island. So when we say that no, Europe was white, medieval Europe was white, no, of course not. People traveled. Some people went on big journeys, pilgrimages, knights traveled, trade people traveled. Like people still migrated. They still moved back and forth. So, of course, most people stayed where they were born, sure, but some people traveled. So it's not true that everything was white, and it's stupid. Sorry, but it's stupid.
No, I mean, there's a lot of like travel that happens in the medieval
Yeah.
ages. One guest I've had in the past, I've talked to him a couple of times, he talks about Vikings, and
Yeah.
Vikings traveled large distances, and
Right.
it would be safe to assume that while they traveled those large distances, they met with other people from different nations, and people ended up traveling together for various reasons.
Yep.
But the world wasn't so compartmentalized as maybe some people think that it was. It was still very interconnected, and involved. People were meeting other people from different places.
Exactly. A trip took longer, sure. You would take a ship. It would take ages to get there. You would take a horse. It would take weeks to get from here to there. Sure, but people still did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
People have always been traveling. I mean, that's just part of like human history, is just migration.
Human nature. Yes. Exactly. That's right. And also, another very interesting fact here is that Arthurian literature was never white, because those early medieval poems that we just discussed, some of them actually have people of color, like knights of color, queens of color in them. Those people are actually part of the history of Arthurian literature. I have a blog post about that as well, where I discuss all these various people of color in Arthurian literature, various knights, their stories, their quests. It's fascinating. So,
That's so interesting.
Side note.
I always love finding out new tidbits of like history that you think you know, but like there's always more to learn about it. Are there any other myths or misbeliefs from this time period that you want?
Yeah, so there is another very interesting fact, historical fact, that was recently published, is about ancient Celts on the British Islands. So it seems that these people were not necessarily patriarchal, meaning that archaeologists and geneticists took the bones and did the DNA tests and everything, and it seems like ancient Celts had a so-called matrilineal culture, which means that it was not the woman who traveled, who moved to be with their husbands, but the other way around. It was the man who actually came to the community as newcomers to wed a wife, which means that it couldn't be the same kind of patriarchal culture as we typically associate with the Middle Ages. Why? Because if it's the man who comes as a newcomer to the family, to the extended family, he is in a much more vulnerable position. If it's the woman who is used as currency, as in the typical medieval image that we have, then she's the new person, she doesn't know anyone, she's really weak in that new social environment. But this is not how ancient Celts organized their social life. They actually had the man travel to have a wife. They had the man settle down with a new family of the wife, which means that they were much less powerful. So it was not a typical patriarchal culture where the father would give away the hand of the maid to another guy as an exchange. No, it was not that. It was something else. We don't know how exactly this society functioned. We can guess. We really don't know. All we have is the DNA studies, the archaeological studies. But it was not patriarchal. It was not the kind of thing that we have in mind when we think about the Middle Ages. And I think that this is fascinating, because this means that we can come up with a matriarchal Middle Age, a matriarchal feudalism, Feudalism is this medieval structure of the kings and queens and knights and vassals and all these treaties. So we can come up with an alternative history, and that's what I did in my book, right? An alternative historical universe where we have a matriarchal feudalism with powerful queens ruling the kingdom and the knights serving them and no damsels in distress, for sure. Like, it's a completely different kind of world. And I think that's fascinating. And this is what I have in my book. I'm not saying this is historically accurate because I don't know how ancient Celts actually lived their lives. I was not there. I cannot know. No one knows. But I'm a fantasy author, so I can just come up with rules for this world. And that's what I did. And this is what my book, Kinightly Whispers, is about.
So I guess that kind of leads us right into building this medieval fantasy world. So you have it that it's rooted in the history. We've kind of talked a little bit about that already. But are there any specific aspects of this world that you've built that you can attribute to the actual history that we can pull from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm also trying to be accurate about the post-Roman times on the British Islands, namely the fact that they were Latinized. So it's about ancient Celts, yes, but they were Latinized. Many people speak Latin, they understand Latin, they read, they collect the works of Latin and Greek classic authors. And of course, London town, which was called Londinium, the Latin name for London town, is also there in the book. It's a very important location. People travel there, do things there. It's part of the world. It's a very Latinized culture, Londinium, compared to these medieval kingdoms, which we have, like Camelot and other kingdoms on the British Islands. Another very interesting historical aspect is that I love astronomy. So I had to have an actual medieval astronomer measuring the stars in that book. And I have that. And of course, it's Merlin, the famous Merlin. And he's not a wizard. He's not a sorcerer at all. He's an actual astronomer who's literate, who's a scholar, who has read the ancient Greek and Roman works, the ancient authors, about the celestial movements and observing the stars and measuring the stars. And he actually does that. He climbs up to the highest tower of Camelot and he observes the stars and does his own measurements with medieval tools and calculations so that he can follow the movements of the planets and understand how the world works and what the planets do on the sky and what the stars do on the sky and all these things. So yeah, that's all in the book. It's really fun. So if you're into this kind of stuff, then please follow me because you will love it.
I always love hearing and reading about medieval science and stuff. It's always so interesting how they made sense of the world with, the tools that they had. Because you can only know what you can know with the tools that you have. Like, you can't go beyond what you have available to you. And obviously there's different innovations and stuff that happen, but it takes a long time to get from medieval science to science where we are today.
Oh yeah, that's a fascinating history.
So it's always fun to see how they made sense of the world with what they had available to them. I'm excited that you're including that in your book. That's very exciting. Is there anything else about historical Camelot or sex in the Middle Ages that you wanted to go more into before we leave today?
Yeah, one more fun fact about sex in my book, depicted in a medieval fantasy. So this is a romantasy. So obviously I'm having open door sex themes in the book. It's very tasteful. It's always consensual. It's nothing rapey there. It's really gentle and everything that you want from a good romantasy. Very passionate. And the fun fact is that it's a very female-centered kind of sexuality, because in this world, women are not second-class citizens. So when they have sex, there is no shame associated with it, not even subconsciously, right? Because in our world, we all grew up in this patriarchal kind of society where even if we are very free and very liberated, there is always this kind of shame, especially for women, how we like, we are ashamed of our bodies. Like, am I too fat? I have a scar here or there. Like, all these things. Do I smell? Like all these kind of thoughts in your head when you're having sex. It's always there. Like, it's very hard to stop this. And in word, these thoughts would never occur. Like, when a woman has sex in this world, all she has is just this righteousness. Like, yes, this is what I do. This is what I deserve. This is how things should be for me. And I should take my pleasure in it. And she takes her pleasure in it without a second thought, without having any other, like, these weird subconscious notions in her head. And it was really liberating to write this, because, like, this is what we should all aim for. This is what we should try to attain in the real world, in our own lives. So writing about it, and I hope reading about it for my readers, will be also very empowering and liberating, hopefully.
So we have this book coming out. So where can people find you, or where can people find the book? And I know you've mentioned your website a couple of times, so I will make sure to link that in the description.
Yes.
But if you can give more specifics on where we can find you.
So I have a Substack. It's called The Carriage, Romantasy for the Curious. That's a very active Substack, and I love to write it. It's basically me, the traveling professor author, inviting you on a carriage ride with me, where I tell you about literature and history and romance and the British Isles and Arthurian history and all these things. It's really fun. Please join. Please follow me. Subscribe. Not just follow, if you can, please subscribe to The Carriage, which is a Substack. I also have an Instagram. That's also a very active Instagram. So if you're an Insta girl or guy, please join my Instagram account and follow me there. I'm posting everything there too. So we are having smaller conversations there too, but mostly the Substack, because the deep stuff is happening on the Substack. The book is not out yet. I am querying literary agents with it right now. I'm also writing this whole process on my blog, so you can follow this process there. I have had quite a few requests from agents already, but I'm still waiting for an offer, so it's still a process. It's actually a very long process, and a very you have to be very patient to get an agent. It's really a number game. You just have to try and try and try and try and try. I'm just being very patient here because I want to be traditionally published and I want to have an agent, a literary agent. So that's my goal with the book. I write about the book and its story and its characters on my Substack. So if you're interested in this stuff, come and join me and let's have a discussion. And I'm very happy to talk about these things.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Felicia, for coming on the show. And I will be definitely checking to see when this book does come out.
Thank you so much, Madison. It was lovely to speak with you.
Thank you again to Felicia for coming on the podcast. I will be linking Felicia's website and blog in the description below. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you liked what you heard, head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave a review. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, you can email me at itsahistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me over on Instagram and Threads at It's a History Podcast. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode, and I hope to have you in the next one.